Hi, welcome to Just the Basics. Sorry for the delay. I think we're a few minutes late, but nothing on the technical end seems to be going right today. Thank you for joining me. I am excited about the first fundamentals of seed, just the basics for 2019. As I mentioned in the email today, I have some exciting announcements at the end of this session, and the second fundamentals of seeds in and out of seeds is taking place next week. So this program is growing quickly, and we've seen attendance continue to increase between each event. Last week, I was in Singapore speaking at Indoor AgCon. I learned a ton of stuff there, and I can't wait to share all of that information with you. So let me see if I can figure out how to not share my screen. I want to share my slides with you. So hopefully you can see them now. It looks like you can, so that's great. And welcome. So now where'd they go? So my name is Michelle Klieger. I am the founder of Stratagerm Consulting. And I actually started with a beginning that you might not expect. I grew up in South Florida on the beach, very far from traditional Midwest agriculture. There were some, as you might know, some produce that is grown in Florida. My family was a big fan of the U-pick strawberries and tomatoes. But I, didn't grow up near a lot of big ag, and this was not the path I expected to take. From a young age, I've always loved wildlife. I used to write a newsletter once a week and send it out to my family and friends all about a specific animal that week. So my plan was to be a wildlife veterinarian. That took me to, in order to be a veterinarian, you have to go to an ag school. So I, worked with zoos, I worked at small animal practices, and I eventually went to the University of Maryland as an agriculture major. Again, not what I expected to do, but I think that it really led me down the right path. During my junior year, I did an internship in South Africa. I was a veterinary technician. It was pretty much the perfect job for me. I loved it. And it actually changed my life in a very unexpected way. When I was there, I, lived and worked on a wildlife farm, and we were surrounded by farms and ranchers. And these people were just trying to grow food to feed their families. And the wildlife often, got in the way of that. And I could never blame the people for, for the conflicts that happened. And one day we were called and we were asked to relocate a leopard. The farmer had trapped it, and if we moved it, he wouldn't kill it. And so we took this opportunity, but we knew, given the large amount of land that leopards cover, that, this was going to continue to be a problem. And it was then that I became really interested in in conservation, and subsequently how we grow food, and if we can do it in a way that's most efficient so that we can feed a growing population while still having land available for wildlife. So that took me to, after graduating from Maryland, I moved to DC. And I became interested in trade policy and economics. I worked for the American Seed Trade Association prior to starting Stratagerm, and here I helped farmers export seeds to 6 continents around the world to help farmers on those, in those various places be more efficient, grow more food. And this really got to the source of growing more on less land. Last year, well, actually, maybe 2017 now, Happy New Year, I spoke at a conference. I attended a conference where there were a few speakers from the indoor ag space. I had followed some agriculture technology, but, really wasn't familiar with the space as much as I wanted to be. So I heard these presenters, and I really saw that, that vertical farming really fits into that mission of growing more food on less land with less water and less inputs. And when I spoke with the people at this conference, it was clear that there were a lot of seed gaps and that there was a lot of focus on the technology and not a lot of focus on the seeds themselves. And so this is how I got my start. I really want to see vertical farms and urban farming move to the next level, be a major part of our food supply. And I think that one of the places that there's a lot of room for opportunity in increasing your output and maximizing your profitability is in picking better seeds. So I came to this again from a plant breeding perspective, and to give really a brief history. We've had agriculture for about 10,000 years, and agriculture is tasked with feeding a growing population of over 7 billion people today. And in most places, people want more food and they want better food. Our diversity of diet has grown exponentially, and the demands of a growing middle class continue to put pressure on agriculture. And a lot of the potential to make these improvements comes from plant breeding. And I'll get into later on what that potential is. But the power of genetics and plant breeding really is going to help make better varieties for these systems so that you can meet your customers' demand and be more profitable. So that's where I come in, trying to help vertical farms be more efficient. It started with the idea of seed selection, but as I've continue to expand and work with more vertical farmers, I understand, and indoor farmers in general, I'm beginning to understand the diverse needs in understanding not just seed selection, but procurement and management. And all of these pieces will definitely improve, again, your profitability moving forward. So you might say, look, I buy seeds, I go through a seed catalog. Why do I, care? Why is this important for me? So your seed supplier's job is to sell you seeds. Hopefully they do a really good job at that. Unfortunately, their job is not to know your operation. They know a lot about their seeds and they don't know very much about your farms. And as you're, very unique and different in a very small section, vertical farms and indoor farms really need special attention and special understanding. Before I've been working with a mentor and a friend for the last year, as Stratagerm really builds up. And one of his clients, he's a seedsman, he's third generation, and one of his clients wanted to grow wheatgrass in a gym so that it could be blended into smoothies right then and there. In his mind, his first concern was the indoor systems, hydroponics, there's going to be a lot of water, and he was really concerned with diseases and controlling diseases. So he was going to recommend seeds with disease resistance. And, through this conversation, I realized that that's not what I would recommend for a vertical farm. I understand why disease resistance makes sense and how it could add value. But for most of these indoor farms, the seeds are growing or the plants are growing for 7 days on that wheatgrass. and maybe less than a month on a lot of your leafy greens. So you're not going to have that same disease pressures you have outside because the turn is so quick. And there were probably characteristics that Jim could have looked for in their seeds that were significantly better. You know, maybe it was a taste, maybe it was that it grew fast, or grew well in high density or high heat. But, you know, coming at it from a traditional ag perspective, I just think that, you know, there are places that seed suppliers might miss what you're really looking for. And so it's important to understand what you want so that you can ask for it from your seed supplier or push back when, you know, what you're looking, when the discussion is misaligned. And I think, and I continue to see that, you know, understanding what you need and being able to ask for it can really improve your output. And that's what the goal here is. The other piece that I like to, you know, start out with in these introductory sessions is, understanding how many different choices there are. So there are 7 different types of lettuces or categories of lettuces. Some are good for sandwiches, some are good for soups, some are good cooked. There's a lot of microgreens in the indoor space. And all of these different lettuces are for different purposes. Different consumers are going to want them. Some people, you know, if you're having a microgreen, you're probably going to want to use it as a garnish, and you might be concerned about, can you get a spicy microgreen or not? Versus you would never want a salad, or I personally would never want a salad of microgreens. I'd much rather a bib or a romaine or something that is crunchy and a good base in a salad. And so understanding that there are so many different types of lettuce and you can't just flip open a seed catalog and pick one is, I think, the first step. And I'll talk more about that, focusing on what your customers want. Last week, again, when I was in Singapore, I spoke right before Rijkswaan. It's a seed company in the Netherlands. They do a lot of lettuce research. They have over 1,000 seed varieties in their company, in their research program. And of those, over 700 are lettuce varieties. So if you're just picking it without understanding these differences, you could really be missing out, or you could be growing something that grows really well in hydroponics, but isn't what your customers are looking for. And so looking at both your customers and your systems will be a theme that you hear me repeat over and over again. And these are just some fun images of lettuce that how different lettuce can look. So looking at, you know, indoor ag is new and it's different, and agriculture is very old. So in the past, we grew food and then we developed technology to improve our methods. So we planted, wheat or rice or vegetables, and then we developed tractors and combines and harvesters to harvest them or to maintain our fields. And so, you know, we've always had some food and we've always been looking for ways to do it better. The amazing thing about indoor agriculture is it really flips that model on its head. We've developed the technology that, you know, every aspect of the system. There are sensors, there are lights, there's nutrients for the water. We've really developed a ton of technology about agriculture, to grow these plants. And now it's time to put the food in those systems. And so this is a total reversal, but, you know, it really does have the potential. You know, we're growing food in a way that's easy to harvest, in a way that manages pests, in a way that maximizes the number of light hours. And then at the end, we're going to take food out. And so that's, hopefully summarizes a little bit of the potential and a little bit of how that seed is important, because you have a custom system and you can look for the characteristics that you want out of your seeds. So a little history, originally in that 10,000 years ago, all of the foods we eat today existed in nature. They grew on plants. The plant's goal was to survive long enough to reproduce. And so they had to be really resilient. They had to be resistant to environmental changes, whether it was high temperatures, freezing, drought, hail, bugs, diseases. Those plants often have thorns. They were often toxic, and the fruit and the edible parts, the part that we really wanted, was small. The goal wasn't to produce food for humans. It was, again, to reproduce and grow the next generation. So now, since we've had agriculture, we've been breeding plants to be a little bit less resilient. We take care of them. We manage a lot of the pests and weeds in competition, and we want those plants to be not toxic. We want them to be safe to eat. We want them to have larger fruits and edible parts. We want them to grow quicker. We want them to transport well, have a long shelf life, and we want them to taste pretty good. So these are the characteristics that we've been breeding plants for since they were domesticated. Now, as we look to the future for indoor ag specific varieties, what we're looking for is going to change even more. Growing quickly is going to be a premium. And with year-round growing and year-round conditions to grow, that's possible. So getting those turns out of your system is going to be really important. Even larger fruit or edible parts will be important. The plant won't need, some of those other features that they are creating, so there can be more focus on the fruit and edible parts. And you might not need as much uniformity, or you might not need it to especially transport well, because hopefully these systems are close to urban centers. And so transportation and shelf life aren't important. And so you can really focus on picking plant seeds that have the best taste. So this is the spectrum of where we're going. We're going from, a wild plant that really had to defend itself and survive a generation, to something that humans are controlling the environment and taking care of very intensely, and really focusing on the output. So we've talked a little bit about seeds. Seeds are the are the reproductive unit of a plant. We're going to talk more about the genes, and those are the, genes, and the genetics is the biological term for how characteristics are passed from one generation to the next. Plant breeders are the ones that select the genes that they want and develop new varieties, which will hopefully have the genes you want to grow on your farm. And a variety is sort of a subset of that type. So the example that I normally use is, there are a lot of lettuces. Within lettuce, there's a type of lettuce called Bib lettuce. And some people like to grow Rex in an indoor system. It has a good track record. So Rex is the variety, and Rex is the name that's given to the variety so that consumers and seed companies know what they're looking for. So these are terms that you'll see throughout the rest of this presentation, and that we'll expand on in the more in-depth intermediary session, especially next week with ins and outs of seed. So when we are growing when we're selecting, when plant breeders are growing new varieties, they're looking for different things. So they might be looking for higher yields. They might be looking for disease resistance, sensitivity to temperature or moisture, especially in indoor systems. They might be very high heat or very high moisture. And another one that we talk about a lot in the indoor space is delayed bolting. And you don't want your lettuces to bolt. And so by looking for genes that have delayed bolting, this might, be a really good trait for indoor ag. So a little bit of biology. I think I've given this presentation a few times now, so hopefully, it's at the right level for you. But we talk a lot as people about nature versus nurture. And that's essentially what this slide is telling you. Nature is the genes. So your genetic material has some influence on who you are. The other piece, or that nurture, is the environment that you grew up in. So your genes plus your environment determines your phenotype, or basically who you are as an individual. And so that nature versus nurture debate looks at how much the genes matter and how much the environment matters. But we all know that both the genetics and the environment impact who an individual becomes. And this is true for both plants and animals and people. And so what's amazing about indoor agriculture is what's amazing about indoor agriculture is that the environment is fixed. You know what the temperature is going to be. You know what the humidity is going to be. You know how many hours of light the plants are going to be exposed to. There's not going to be adverse weather conditions. There's not going to be a shortage of food. There's not going to be a shortage of water. These are all things that you are controlling. And so if you take the environmental change out of the equation, your genetics have a huge impact on what the plants become. So if you take nurture out or make it very minimal, that nature, those genes have a huge impact. And that's really why picking the right seeds for your system is so important to indoor agriculture, because you have more control over what those plants look like than any outdoor farmer ever has. And that's really the difference. We can't control how much sun there is, but we can control how much light there is. And the lights even in indoor take it a step farther. We can control what the wavelength that plant is exposed to. And that's some work that Professor Kevin Folta has done at the University of Florida. He took red Russian kale and he grew it under about 10 different lights. And as you can see from this picture, those plants look different. Those sprouts look different in each one of those lights. And so you can either adjust your lights to get the plant you want, or you can also adjust the seeds and those genetics to get the plant you're looking for. And so that's really an introduction of why the seeds are really important to your system. When Stratagerm, works with clients, we work on the whole seed program. We look at these 4 parts. First, we have a strategic review, and this looks at what your customers are looking for. Are you selling to farmers markets? Are you selling to restaurants? Are you selling to grocery stores? And if you're selling to a farmer's market, they might want a field green that fits in a plastic bag and is airy and looks great, and really fills that bag. And versus if you're selling to a restaurant, you might be selling heads of lettuce with the roots on to really show that freshness. They'll need to fit in those clam packs and stack nicely. So those are 2 totally different products. If you're selling to a restaurant, what is that chef doing with it? How are they presenting it? What part of the doesn't need to be cooked? Versus if you're selling to a household, does it need to be easier to use? Is presentation less important? So understanding what your customers are looking for and picking the right, types of crops is really important. A lot of the work right now and a lot of what's grown indoors right now, or at least in indoor ag, sort of that vertical farming space, is leafy greens. But these principles of understanding your customers apply to all types of crops. For years, there have been tomatoes that are for processing tomatoes that are used in ketchups and sauces and other dips. And there are normal tomatoes that you'd want to eat, and they, have different amounts of water in them, and they're used for different purposes. You have table grapes and you have wine grapes. So there's a lot of different, variation, and understanding what your customer wants is critical in making them a repeat customer. If you're trying to sell someone something that they're not looking for, they're probably not going to buy your produce again, even if you are the most local, have a great sustainability story. They're just not getting what they want from you, and they'll probably go back to the grocery store and purchase the produce that they are looking for. So making sure that you have that end market and you understand it is the most important piece of this. Then looking at the technical specifications of your system. So Stratagerm has an 8-part worksheet that really talks about, tries to understand your system. What lights are you using? What type of environment are you growing in? Is it a hydroponic system? Is it an aeroponic system? What's the climate? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is there ventilation? And again, this works through a lot of different categories. If you're interested in those categories, I'm happy to include that in the notes or some kind of follow-up. I just find that this part of the presentation gets a little long. The last one in that technical specification that I would like to point out, though, is organics. Are you looking for organic seed? Is this something that you are striving for? A lot of indoor operations are not looking for organics. In the United States, hydroponics can be an organic method. In Europe, they can't. And so if you're looking for organic seed, we need to know that. And then the last piece is prioritizing. So some of these things you can change. You can change whether you want to be organic certified or not. You can change the light spectrum, hopefully pretty easy, or the number of hours of lights. You can adjust the nutrients in your water or how often you recycle the water, but you can't if you have a plant factory and it is a warehouse. You're probably not going to cut a hole in the ceiling to make it exposed to nature, like have sunlight or have that ventilation. So understanding what you can change about your system and what you can't will be important, because no seed is going to be a designer seed specifically for your system. So we might be able to get you most of the way and help you to find a better seed, but in the end, you might have to then go back and tweak the system to really get the most value. Once you've picked your seeds, you'll want a purchasing plan. So understanding the seed production cycle and how to work well with seed companies. It seems maybe strange that you would need to understand how to work with seed companies, but remember that seed production has grown up with the traditional agriculture system. And so traditional agriculture needs seeds once a year for the most part. And so seeds are available in the spring to growers. And those growers then plant the seed and harvest in the fall. And so this is when seed companies make seeds, they actually have to grow plants and let them go all the way to seed and harvest those seeds before they can sell them to you. So it's not coming out of a factory. They're not a widget. They're not available on demand. And so understanding when seed companies are placing their orders, when they're deciding what they want to grow, which is honestly a year to 18 months before you purchase the seed, is when they are deciding what they're going to plant. So if you're looking for a large quantity or something really unique, you're going to need to decide that long in the future. And these are some of the things that we help customers and clients figure out. Then once you get the seed onto your site, you'll need to manage it. Seeds are living, and they will, you want to maintain the highest quality in order to, again, have those high germination rates and make sure that your produce is coming out as good as possible. So understanding what that germination test is, understanding the right climate of your facility, understanding, inventory management practices, whether that means using the oldest seed, how to check the temperature correctly and make sure that across your entire warehouse, your quality is even, or just, if you're importing or working across country lines, how do you manage how often you want to import versus how much storage you want to have? And so these are some of the pieces of that on-site management that will really help you get the most out of your seed. And finally, we look at trials and evaluation. So after that strategic review, you'll have a few seed choices, and you'll want to compare the data of how those seeds did in your system to previous ones. We will never suggest that you stop what you're doing and plant something totally new without any basis. Generally, we recommend that you take a small area and try something new and record everything. All of that data that you have about your system, you'll want to compare to everything you learn about the seeds or about that specific variety. How big was the lettuce? How big was the head? How big was the smallest one? How big was the largest one? What was the average? What was the color? A lot of these, data points we can use to figure out what it is you want and how to keep getting you there. And then the hardest part for a lot of people is at some point you'll have to stop making changes, or at least large continuous changes, because every time you tweak the genetics or the environment, you're going to get a different phenotype. And so once you're happy, you don't want to keep making changes without a process in place, because you will potentially change your outcome, and maybe not for the worse, the better. So a few of the takeaways that I hope you got from, this quick presentation is that you'll need to be your own seed expert, or your seed supplier knows seeds and they know their business, but they really don't know yours. And so the more you can communicate and the better you can communicate with your seed supplier, the better off you will be in making sure you're getting the seeds you need. As a farmer, your business is judged based on the produce. You might have, again, a great local story, a great sustainability story, huge funders or backers, or, whatever that other piece is. But ultimately, the way that you're going to be judged is on what you grow and how much your customers enjoy eating it. And if they don't enjoy eating it, then they're not going to purchase from you again. So really figuring out your customers and how you're selling to them is important. And then understanding those technical requirements of your farm so that we can help you find the seeds you need to maximize the output and the profitability. And we didn't get into this much today, but there's a lot of different ways to define profitability. And I want to know how you're defining profitability. Is it higher yield? Are you looking to get more produce out of your farm? Or are you trying to get higher quality produce that you can charge a higher price for? And once we've identified which of those or what combination or other factors that you use to define profitability, it'll again help us inform that seed selection process. And then the process, your seed system, your seed program doesn't end once you've purchased the seed or once you've selected the seed. You then need to purchase it. You need to make sure that you're not having shortages, that it's showing up on time, that it's the high quality, that you're getting the germination that you need. That you're managing your inventory correctly, and that you're evaluating those seeds so that in the future, you know what you want to order the next time. So this was designed to be an introductory session. The next session is more of an intermediate level, and it takes place next Tuesday, January 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's the first time that we are running the ins and outs of seeds. And the way we picked the topics for this session was really conversations that I've had with clients and customers after previous showings of this webinar. So I found that there's a lot of questions around seeds themselves. What is a GMO seed? Are you buying them? What does that mean? What is organic seed and what is conventional seed? So, there are a lot of questions both from growers and marketing departments around these terms and making sure that they're being used correctly. On the outside of a seed, there are questions about what is pelleted seed and what does that mean? What is not pelleted and what are seed treatments or how are seeds treated? And this is important because it does interact with the previous topic. There are seeds that can be organic and have an organic pellet, and there are other, pelleting procedures that are not organic. And then how does price, or what goes into the price of the seed? You might see large changes or variations in seed catalogs or between seed producers, and what are some of the factors that account for that seed price? And once you know that, hopefully you can help manage your costs. And finally, the last thing I think that we can squeeze into this presentation is about quality and testing. And I think that we'll go into more depth in the future, but I would like to give, the basics of what is seed quality, what are you being guaranteed, what does germination mean, what are germination tests, and how do you know that you're getting healthy seed and how to, look for it. So understanding a little bit more about what happens to that seed before it gets to your farm. So this webinar, this ins and outs of seeds, will be $47. It includes all of the fees, so I'll take that. It is $47, not anything more, no matter how you pay. This website that you use to sign up for this webinar, stratagerm.com/webinar, has the link to sign up for this ins and outs of seeds webinar. Just like today, you can sign up and join live. I will answer questions throughout the presentation, or I will be sending out the replay. So if you're not able to join me for the presentation or the webinar, I'm happy to, to answer questions offline individually after you've attended or had time to watch the replay. As a special offer to anyone who signs up before the end of the day on Friday, I, really learned a lot at Indoor AgCon Asia in Singapore last week. And I hope that, and I got great feedback on the presentation. So I will be making that presentation or a recording of the presentation available for anyone that signs up for the ins and outs of seeds, as well as the one-page graphic that was put together from that presentation. So hopefully these, little bits will add even more value to a webinar that I think covers a lot of really important topics for, every level of farmer. So I don't know if there are any questions from anyone on here. I will. So I don't know if hopefully we've covered everything, but please let me know if you have questions, and I really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon.